Welcome back, everybody, to Hoops HD. I think we're going now. This is our weekly Hoops HD report. I am your host, Chad Sherwood, with a all-star panel coming to you Brady Bunch style here this evening. Recording this in the evening of Monday, January 4th. As I mentioned, I'm Chad Sherwood, joined up top here by Joby Fortson and the puppet, David Griggs.
Yes.
In the center square, we have Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org. To his sides, John Titel and John Stalika, and Zach with us down there, coming to us from Liverpool, according to the side from behind you. That's
Not quite.
No, not quite from Liverpool.
Doesn't rain that much here.
Everton better. I just want that note.
We obviously have a lot to get to here, and before we even get into the games and the results and upcoming games that are going to get canceled and the like, there were two big things that came out today. First of all, the NCAA made it official that the entire NCAA tournament will be played in and around Indianapolis at about half a dozen different venues. Selection Sunday is going to stay on as scheduled. They're hoping to have the Final Four as scheduled, and we don't really know much more than that, I think, at the moment. This has been kind of teased for a while from the NCAA, but Rocco, let me start with you. What are your thoughts about this idea here of let's just play it all in Indianapolis, but not much else known at the moment?
Yeah, I think at least gives us a little bit of a starting point, right? We know where the venues are going to be. It sounds like when we get down to the end of the tournament, it's going to mostly be at Lucas Oil, having two courts, but not having two games at the same time. So that could, we could make some guesses about that. Obviously, the Final Four will be there, perhaps even the last 8 or 16 teams. But the goal of it all, of course, is to create a controlled environment because it's not a true bubble. Where no teams will get hopefully infected while they're still alive in the tournament or at all, and get all 67 games completed in the tournament. And that was one thing they were very adamant today during all the press conferences and interviews was this will be a 68-team tournament with 67 games, same format we've all gotten used to over the last decade. So however they want to shake it out, it's going to happen at Butler, IUPUI, Indiana, Assembly Hall, West Lafayette, Mackey Arena, and downtown at Bankers Life Arena. And so it'll be pretty cool to see how they shake it out.
Hinkle Fieldhouse too?
Yeah, Butler, yep.
Okay. So
Hinkle. So, yeah, we'll see. I think what you'll find out in the next wave of announcements is exactly how many teams will go to each location. I'm guessing there might only be, let's just say 8 at IUPUI. Perhaps another location like Purdue could hold 16. So we have to just see how all that breaks out. I think they're working through all the logistics. There's a lot of planning. The NCAA, of course, is headquartered in Indianapolis. And for them to pull together last-minute arrangements and logistics, which will be necessary in a very fluid tournament, this is the best way for them to pull it off. So they had to do it here, I think.
Yeah, and Titel, let me ask you about this also here. Part of my understanding is that they're going to use a convention center there for practice that is attached to the hotels that all the schools will be staying at. So 68 different floors over various different hotels, I guess, is the plan. And no fans or some fans, or what else do we know?
I think it's going to be limited family. I would not expect too many fans, if any. And as much as I want the media to be there, I'm not holding my breath on that either. The NCAA has 375 million reasons to make this work after not making it work last March. So I think they will move heaven and earth to get this done. And I'm all for mitigating risk. If it takes 68 different hotel floors, so be it. My concern, what happens if there's a positive test? Does it matter if it's a player or a coach? Does it matter if it's one player or 5 players? Like, that's the big X factor, which they can try to mitigate it all they want. But one positive test could throw a lot of chaos into the mix.
Yes. That's a good point, John. And one of my biggest concerns is that this is not subsiding the way that it needs to. We have been able to play a season. I think that while it's been different and while there have been cancellations, the season has been able to flow somewhat, and it feels more like the regular season than I thought it would. But a cancellation or a postponement is far more disruptive to a tournament than it is to a regular season or conference play or something like that. So if you can't get through a single day of, typically 20 to 30 games without having 3, 4, 5, or sometimes 10 or sometimes more canceled, how are you going to get through a 68 team tournament? Now, I know that like Selection Sunday is the same. The Final Four is the same, at least for now. This could all change in a week. Let's keep in mind that this is, while in concrete, not dry concrete, it's still very wet. They could pull the plug on it and alter it again in a week or 2 weeks or more. But how can you host a 68-team event and have it and expect it to go uninterrupted based on what we've seen? One of the ideas might be to get all the teams there and have them isolate for a week, and that's teams, coaches, trainers, everybody that travels with the team, not just the players. But the issue with that is there are going to be some schools, and maybe more than just a few, that don't like the idea of, in the middle of March, in the middle of the spring semester, having a men's and women's, and potentially a women's basketball team too, away from campus for potentially a month. There's going to be more than a little bit of pushback. I'm not saying that they won't be able to have the tournament at all, but to say that there won't be any pushback, I think is a little naive. I think there's going to be more than just a little. And one of my ideas, I don't know if I've said this on the air very much, but I've shared it with you, is should we just wait until after the semester is over and play in May? Now, I realize that there's a lot of things that are not ideal about that, but I think that it could, the chances of pulling this off without disruption in May, after the semester is over, after classes are over, and after everyone either has the vaccine or, if not, has the chance to isolate for a week before the event starts, are far greater than trying to do it in March. Just my opinion. And the other problem that the NCAA hasn't addressed is, we're not going to get into this too much, but it is worth mentioning, this is one of 90 championships. There are 89 more across the three divisions that they are expecting to do between now and June. And I just don't know how they're going to do that. You hate to be in a situation where you have to decide who gets to play and who doesn't, but is that where we are?
Well, thank you, folks, for joining us. We're out of time now. Oh, just kidding, David.
Yeah.
But David, I do have to take one issue with something. You start off by saying that we are getting this season in. Zach, I want to ask you this. We are getting this season in. I see half a dozen teams that still haven't gotten a game against a D1 foe in yet that intend to play. I don't know that it's working.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when I saw it's about 20% of the games have been postponed or canceled or effective, it actually feels like more than 20%.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that's because, you notice the one game that gets postponed and not the 5 that you don't at all think about. It's working in the sense that this is working. The problem is, I think David makes a good point about, like, inevitably, as well planned as this might be and whatever, if somebody's going to have the virus unless they, and even maybe if they do a 2-week like lockdown before it. And like, then what? I mean, if one team is affected, the entire tournament is affected, the entire integrity of the thing at the least, and practically the ability to conduct it the most. And you're stuck between things where, I mean, I don't think they're going to play the tournament across the traditional amount of time they normally would, for a variety of reasons that are COVID and a variety that are logistical. I mean, the season's happening. Is it I mean, it's not remotely, not that the tournament doesn't count, but this can't, if there was a year where you could use the tournament doesn't determine the best team. I mean, this is it. We basically have no non-conference. Some conferences are going to play. I mean, BU and Holy Cross played the first of their 6-game series, today. And then you're going to have other teams that just don't play other teams in their conferences and power conferences. You have teams. I mean, I don't know if Depaul's going to play 5 games this year. And it's that in and of itself makes it difficult, but it gets difficult before then because we're talking about the NCAA tournament. But like, what the heck's going to happen with these, conference tournaments? At least the NCAA, we have a kind of a plan now. So the thing is, we're just going to, like, championship week's supposed to just happen as normal, but with no fans. They're just going to pull off a Big East tournament.
Well, I would argue.
What happens when the 3 seed in the SoCon tournament has a case? You stop the whole tournament? No.
Well, Zach, but I think there's a way out there. I mean, if conference can't finish this conference tournament, it can predetermine we're going to give our regular season champion the bid, and that's it. You don't have that way out with the NCAA tournament.
That's fair, but then I wonder about a little bit if you get kind of and I mean, this isn't the most concerning thing, but it is a thing that will come up if you start to get, obviously, like not in the low major conferences, but in the major conferences, if it's, all right, we're doing a Big 12 tournament, but this doesn't determine, like, there's no auto bid here. Well, if Oklahoma State bombs out, Cade Cunningham's not playing in that then. Like, there's no reason for him to play in that if he can't make the NCAA tournament. So I think there's a little concern about you start losing players who are worried about, like, draft stock or being able to – it's not even just the NBA draft. I mean, the European basketball market was becoming lucrative, and now those jobs are even harder to get now because there's much fewer. So I'm less worried about that, but, like – and I'm not going to pretend that the regular season champ shouldn't get it, especially in the smaller conferences. But, I mean, what the hell's the 7 seed in the Big South tournament team? Like, that's the other side of this. If you're going to have that tournament and these kids are going to have to quarantine, like, if you're going to take the 7th place team in the Big South, tell them they're locked in a hotel for a week and it's not even for an NCAA tournament bid, I mean, I'm a little uncomfortable with that.
And the problem is we're talking about the quarantine because that's the common sense way of addressing this. But the problem is the NCAA didn't even talk about timelines today, and they made it sound like, oh, we're going to keep the same timelines. Selection Sunday's the same. But that's insane.
Yeah.
Well,
I think you can't fit in the games with 68 because you got Tuesday, Wednesday, and Dayton. All of a sudden, the reason why they're doing this is because of TV. Do you really think TV is going to love having, like, Monday but not a Saturday? I mean, it's just insanity. Really.
The other side of that is, I mean, the optics are what they are now and the way that things are towards name, image, and likeness. You're going to take Michigan's basketball team and tell them they're locked in Indiana for 3 weeks to lose in the Sweet Six in the Elite Eight. I mean, the NBA guys got paid. That's hard. That's a hard look even for them to try that. That's why I agree with what you're saying. They don't want TNT doesn't want to have games on a Monday night. They don't want to get stuck with hoping with 3 games on a Saturday and 3 on a Thursday, but that might be the way it is. And I'll say this, the thing they'll really hate is by doing that, they get less of the tournament they want, and you still owe $375 million.
Exactly.
So
It's
that side of it,
billion,
yes.
by the way, but yeah.
Then you're getting down to what does their contract say they're allowed to do. And
why they should kick it back, because I think with the NBA playoffs being kicked back, you may know better than me, but I think that they would deal for the same money. I think CBS and Turner would deal with the same money for more certainty. Now they'll tighten the screws if something wrong goes and it's delayed. But
I mean, there's lots of there's make goods on that. One that the NCAA wouldn't want to do, but the easy one is you give them an extra year. Even just, I mean, based on last year, the contract rolled over an extra year. They did that, I believe. Don't quote me on that.
They did.
But the other side of it, I mean, the practical nature is this. I mean, TNT can make the space and all that, but, like, they've got the NBA contract. So when you talk about wanting to wait until after the NBA playoffs, well, you're going to be waiting until July then, and that's not going to work. If you do it during the NBA playoffs, then Turner's going against their number 1 spring thing. They're not going to want that. But, if you tell them, well, no, just put more games on TBS and True TV. Well, the NCAA isn't going to want that. I mean, we already saw what happened. The idea of having the Final Four be on cable every other year was this great injustice that was not allowed, and they were already getting rid of that, if you remember. It was going back to being on CBS every year. So, and ironically enough, I think CBS, the big network, is actually the one where it's easiest to get the space because nobody cares about regular primetime television anymore. And nobody's been able to produce anything new.
You don't want to watch 3 hours of NCIS every night?
Yeah, well, it's a built-in rating. You can air no left for that. You're getting the same number.
How much?
I think it's more the TV networks in a way don't really have a lot of leverage here. It's what I don't think. I mean, they're not going to want to sue each other. They don't want question.
Yeah, Zach, or Chad, I know you want to move on real quick, but I wanted to ask Zach a real quick question. Like, how much TV time do you need? Because outside of the first the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday of the first weekend of the tournament, you're not talking about a lot of games. You're talking about 2 doubleheaders, essentially a 7 and a 9 tip Thursday, Friday, and then just 2 afternoon games Saturday and Sunday. I don't know how this – like, you talk about not wanting to put it up against what they have. can't they work around that? Like the NBA playoffs go on for months. The NCAA tournament's over in 19 days.
I mean,
and you're only playing really on – you only really have from noon to midnight 4 days of that. The rest of it is doubleheaders, and that's it.
Well, if these 10 months have taught us anything, it's that all of this stuff, not especially in college sports, but in college sports, all this stuff is very, very much more mobile than we thought. All it took was the threat of a global pandemic to suddenly make everything a lot more doable that should have been doable the whole time. It comes down to it doesn't take a lot of time in the current format where it's everybody plays day one, day two. I don't know what they're going to – because it goes back to what Drew said, we don't have timelines. So I can't tell you if it's like normal, yes, you're right. We're only talking about a couple of days. But if they're going to try and stretch us a little because they got to give look, we all know, we said things, these kids are, the players are used to playing 3 games a day in AAU, but they don't want college basketball to be like that unless the SEC tournament and there's a tornado. They're not, I don't know if they want to have every other day you're playing and that's the other side of it, by the way. That's when you get into Turner and CBS's side of it is the bang of the buck for March Madness isn't over 10 days. It's over a month. You have a month. That's why you pay all the money. I don't know if they're going to be exactly on board with the idea of, so what we're going to do is we're going to play the whole tournament in 10 days. So that way we don't screw up your schedule. Turner will happily screw up their schedule if they get more than 10 days of basketball on which 3 of them are like a Monday, a Tuesday, and a Wednesday. So that's when and also the one thing, I saw some people online saying, well, it's not bubble. Look, they're going to Mackey, they're going to Bloomington. Those sites, I think, are only going to be used for the first round. I think they want to get this as central as quick as they can.
Right.
And we think they're tightening up the timeline here, because if they weren't, they could just use Lucas Oil and Banker's Life. But the fact that they're trying to get this many sites, some of them outside Indianapolis, tells me they're going to try and run through this thing quick. And I don't blame them. And I also think while it sucks having a tournament in 10 days, I think having the kids be isolated for 6 weeks, that's when I start to get a little really uncomfortable.
Well,
We're asking enough.
Well, I'll tell you what. I mean, well, first of all, I do agree. I mean, they are going to be – the plan is to have them all staying centrally again near the convention center there and basically put you on a bus to wherever you're going, which could be, a ride out to Assembly Hall or to Purdue or wherever else you're going. But I do want
to – just real quick, I know Chad, you were going to move.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, we got to get moving on here because we got a lot more to get to.
It's going to be the intake testing is going to be the key, because that's what we learned in Connecticut with the Mohegan Sun thing. That's why I want to see what they're going to do for a quarantine between teams that are in and when they're starting. Because you can test all you want, but if it turns up that 3 teams show up and they have it, then what?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's get moving on here, and I'm going to bring up on the screen right here these standings, and these are the standings. We'll start today in the Big 12 Conference. We've got a lot of games to go over, but one thing that you're going to see that is new on the standings page this week, as of today, we do have net ratings out. This is the NCAA's metric that everybody complains about when it first comes out because it's not based on enough data, and it never is, and especially this year when you've got teams like, I think we saw Colgate coming in at number 16 because they've played all of 2 games. These numbers will sort themselves out, first of all. So I would not worry too much about them. But Rocco, let me start with you, first of all, because the reason I want to start with the Big 12 is because of the team that is now number 4 in the nation, not the team that's number 2 even, but the Texas Longhorns and what they did in Lawrence this weekend.
I mean, it was tremendous what they did in Lawrence this weekend. I thought that was the moment Texas faithful have been waiting for since they hired Shaka Smart. A lot of moments of doubt that they would ever have a moment like that. And the reason why it was so significant is not just that they won, but they won by 25. I thought a lot of the college basketball community was tweeting out, is Texas back? Is Texas back on Saturday? I thought that was a little overboard. I thought this team established themselves as a really good team when they won the Maui Invite and played Villanova down to the Horn. They're clearly a top-tier team in my book, and this obviously solidifies that even further. The worst loss in Bill Self's career. I just think what you see with Texas is a team just loaded with experience, and you add in a freak like Greg Brown, who's a first-round lottery pick, to go along, who had a horrible game, by the way. Didn't need him at all. Kai Jones was amazing in the first half. Jericho Sims, Matt Coleman, steady all year. And then Andrew Jones, just a tremendous story coming back from leukemia. So credit to the Longhorns, just the best game they could have dreamed of in Fog Allen over the weekend.
And Stalika, let me bring you in as well. Another story here was actually for both Oklahoma schools. Let's start with the Sooners, though, getting a very notable win at home against West Virginia.
Well, at least it keeps Oklahoma on the radar as far as beating West Virginia right here. And you couple that with the TCU win from earlier, they're going to be 2-1. But I think we have to look towards Stillwater for the bigger story here, because the one win they do get, they win at Texas Tech. So you combine that with Oklahoma State currently leading at home against West Virginia. So maybe Oklahoma State, of course, this is the big if, are they going to be eligible? Will they get their waiver for the tournament? Because I think right now they look like a potential NCAA tournament team if they're allowed to play. And then Texas Tech, not quite a slam dunk right now, but still looking more like a team that, let's say, will be wearing white come the first round.
Yeah, as we record this, Oklahoma State is up almost 10 points but still in the first half. So as you all watch this, you'll know the results of that game. But Untitled, I want to bring you in and talk about another team that did not get any love in either of the top 25 polls, but sitting at 9-2 overall, including a win at Kansas State. I'm not going to say impressive, but a win at Kansas State. How about TCU?
A very quiet 9-2. They beat Kansas State only by 7 points. I mean, they're no Fort Hays State, but they're not too bad. A brutal homestand this week. Kansas Tuesday, Baylor Saturday. So I assume they're going to go 0-2, but we'll see. They only have one senior on the roster. I think they're a year away from contending. Junior R.J. Nembhard, he's missed a couple of games due to illness. He scored 21 or more in 5 of his last 7. He's a legit contender for the all-conference first team.
Rocco, you have a little news on them?
No, I was just earlier here in the chat, gentlemen, I just want to mention when we were talking about West Virginia's recent struggles, well, it turned out before the Oklahoma game, I think it was Saturday morning, they announced that Oscar Tshiebwe left the program, and Huggins said that he will not be coming back at all this year. And that's a monster blow to all Big 12 player, a beast down low. Of course, they're going to be shaken up in these 2 games in Oklahoma. We'll see how they adjust next week.
That is a major blow. We're not going to speculate as to what you just kind of hate to see that, but yeah, out of the program, and it shows.
There's a ton of good games coming up this week, including Oklahoma at Baylor, followed by at Kansas, huge, and we've got Texas at West Virginia on Saturday, assuming West Virginia gets things squared away. Another huge game, but we do have a lot to get to here, and I want to jump right over to the ACC. And Joe, we bring you in because you are our ACC guy, and I think you had some thoughts about the net rating, actually, especially when you look at the ACC.
It's very interesting, and you see it. The net rating has 2 components. The ACC and the Big Ten, had the challenge. It went 7-6, 6-7, depending on what point of view you go with. And what was very interesting about that is the ACC seemed to win a lot of the games lower versus lower, and the Big Ten won higher versus higher, or so we thought. Pitt, Northwestern might actually be middle, at least, for instance, in as far as an ACC win. But look at the net ratings. If you compare the net ratings to a lot of the other ratings, including my own, the net typically has more teams that are at least in the field or NIT level in the ACC than many of the others, with the exception of Duke being way off the norm. And so what you're looking at is all of a sudden wins over a Syracuse, who's 25 in the net, is all of a sudden a Tier 1 win. Is it a Tier 1 win with the eye test? I don't know. But the fact that we are pretty much done with non-conference play, I think these ratings will be static within the conferences to a degree. So all of a sudden, an opportunity arises for a Florida State to improve off their 60, a Virginia to improve off their 45 with a win at Syracuse. And Syracuse's will drop, but in turn, theirs will go up much more than what it would have been if we were going with a Syracuse strength of record of 45 or, et cetera. So it's the net treated the ACC, except for Duke, who has a low number of games, pretty well. And when you get to the Big Ten, I'll show you why Duke, it was not treated well.
Well, let's. I want to talk about some of these teams also. There's two teams I think had huge stories this week. And Zach, I'd like to bring you up about a Georgia Tech team that I think you and I were the only two people in the country that like heading into the season. They finally had a good week. Finally.
Yeah, under the steady hand of Josh Pastner, the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets had a very good week. They won against had two ACC wins this weekend against a Wake Forest program that exists.
That had been a previously undefeated Wake Forest team. Thank you.
A previously undefeated Wake Forest team in North Carolina, and I will say this: the best thing to happen in North Carolina this year is what's happening to Duke, and especially Kentucky, because nobody is really going to pay much attention to if North Carolina struggles compared to the other two massive car crashes that I just mentioned. But no, it's a Georgia Tech team that's 6-3. I like them. I don't think this is sustainable, but right now they are 2-1 in conference. They've actually been a stronger defensive team than I thought. But they've done a very good job of everything that isn't the three-pointer. They're fine at. Unfortunately for Georgia Tech, I think folks who watch basketball know the three-pointer has become a bit of a factor. And teams are kind of running on them. That's also a concern. But it's a good start for Georgia Tech, and they have a huge game this week if they want to actually try and make hay in the ACC Wednesday night at Notre Dame. I mean, that's the sort of, if they want to actually like climb up a little bit into the top half of being a top half ACC team, that's the kind of game on the road they've got to go in. I don't want to say they've got to win, but they've got to at least, be competitive. And as was alluded to by Joby, the conferences, the net ratings are going to kind of stay pretty similar because there's not going to be a lot of cross-pollination here. So, which means also that the bottom end wins in those leagues are going to actually be a lot more valuable than they probably should be. Because, for example, you didn't get Boston College getting a chance to lose to Harvard this year. So that number is baked up. It just as an example.
Still 2-7.
Yeah, they're still 2-7.
Really, they're very bad at basketball, but they're going to be very bad against good teams.
That's ridiculous.
So their net isn't going to fall quite like it should.
David, I want to ask you about the other big story in this conference, and that is a team that I don't know that we've discussed as much as they deserve so far, but here they are at the highest rated net in the conference. How about Clemson?
Yeah, and again, when you pull up their resume, and Chad, that's the cue to pull up the resume. There aren't any really big monster wins on there. Like there's nothing that blows you away like what Texas did at Kansas, but there's so much decent there. Like there's a lot of there's enough fair wins and to really put together a strong resume. Like I don't think they've beaten any. It's coming here in about 10-20 minutes. But yeah, like Alabama, Purdue, these are teams that are going to hover around the bubble or at least be in the NIT. Maryland, not good but decent. Florida State at home. Florida State might be a good team, but beating them at home, not great but decent. At Miami. So there's a lot of decent wins on this resume. And when you add all that decency together, I think it comes out to pretty good. This is one of the best defensive teams in the country, probably one of the 4 or 5 best defensive teams in the country statistically and on the court. They're hard to score against. And they're off and running. And when you look at what's ahead, NC State, North Carolina, these are all winnable games. If you hate offense, be sure and tune into that Syracuse and Virginia game.
Yeah.
And real quick, like 2012, I just want to say this to Zach. South Florida did not belong in, and neither does Georgia Tech.
Okay. I mean, you were wrong then, and you're wrong now. So.
Yeah, well, let's not debate 2004.
That was justified because they won 2 games in the tournament.
Anyway, we got to move on. We got to move on.
Okay, we are definitely not debating 2004. Don't let me pull the buzz around on you. Titel, I don't think you want to discuss another team with only 1 loss overall here, right?
As David mentioned, Clemson does host NC State coming up. 6-1 are the Wolfpack. They did have a road loss at St. Louis last month, which looks fine just on the surface because St. Louis is good. When you look at it a little closer, Cam Hayes and DJ Funderburk both missed that game. They're both now back on the court. I have them just inside the bubble as a 12 seed.
Okay. Stalika, here's the upcoming schedule of games that will probably – half of them will get canceled. Is there anything you're really circling here, including maybe Saturday, Clemson at North Carolina? Could they do it for the 2nd straight season?
Well, Clemson's also going to have NC State at home right here, so obviously
the bubblicious game.
overlooking that one right here. But then again, North Carolina, you're still waiting for them to get started on the gas pedal here. But then again, we are talking about a team that's only won once in their lifetime at North Carolina.
It could be 2 years in a row. We'll find out on Saturday.
And look what happened after they finally did.
I'll tell you what, Joby, you mentioned the Big Ten earlier, so they wanted to compare their numbers. Let's go straight to the Big Ten next, actually. And let me ask you, as we pull these numbers up and you see, wow, single digit and top 20 nets all over the place here.
Except for one, Chad. Look at the triple digit, and I'm not talking about Tim Miles' former location. So.
Well, they would not be triple digits if he was still there.
Michigan State, and we say, 1-3, 7-3 over conference. But all of a sudden, the wins over a Duke and a Kentucky aren't as magical. And it's actually bringing down where, even though I think Duke is much better than the 120 net or whatever it is they are, the fact is the nets are there. And as Zach and I said, the numbers are starting to get locked in. You get a 119 net. You get an 80 net. You're not in this tournament, period. You really aren't. Maybe COVID will mix things around, but Michigan State's in trouble here if they don't get on the gear and start winning a lot of games, not just get to 500, but winning a lot of games in the Big Ten. I think Izzo and company can do it. Don't get me wrong. But they are in a they're more at DEFCON 2 than what the normal fan looking at might say, oh, they've got to get on the stick. They're only 1-3 in conference. No, they got to get moving now, or they will miss the tournament.
Yeah, they struggled at Nebraska. Rocco, we saw a lot of other interesting games this past week, but I think we got to give a little attention to the 9-0 Michigan Wolverines, who just barely made the top 10 in the nation despite being undefeated and one of only 3 true power conference teams that are undefeated.
You do. I mean, you have to acknowledge the fact that they're blowing the doors off of most of their opponents. The real tight game came against Oakland in overtime, go figure, and then another pretty tight one with Penn State. But besides that, all double-digit wins. For as loaded as the Big Ten is, they may have had the easiest first 4 games you can find with Nebraska mixed in and Northwestern. They finally kind of exposed them. They hit a wall yesterday. But I mean, it's such a tough league. You can't really say there's an easy 4-0, and the metrics are there to back them up. Big game coming up with Minnesota Wednesday. I think Michigan being at home, they should be favored there, and another Penn State matchup over the weekend. So they got a real shot to get up to 6-0. Then they'll start hitting some real road tests a little bit later in the month.
Yeah, Ty Tell, he mentioned Minnesota coming up with that game. Interesting week that they lose badly at Wisconsin, but then they go ahead and they pick up a real nice home win over Ohio State.
This is the winningest team in the best conference in the country. Let's give them a little love after the big win over Ohio State. 2 road losses at Illinois, at Wisconsin, perfectly respectable. Huge road trip this week, as Rocco mentioned. Michigan Wednesday, Iowa Sunday. We're going to see exactly what they're made of. Marcus Carr's shooting's been very mediocre over the past 2 weeks. Liam Robbins, the Drake transfer, has bailed them out against the Buckeyes. 27 points, 14 boards, 5 blocks. I have them as a 7 seed and trending upward.
Zach, I want to get your take on my team, on the Scarlet Knights here, who had a really great game against Iowa, came right down to the end. They really had a shot to win that. The only other loss, Ohio State, another game that they could have won except they kind of wheels fell off with the officials not knowing what they were doing.
Yeah, no, I'm incredibly impressed with your boys. I was actually going to jump in and say Chad's not allowed to talk about that. I have to. But it was to be just as funny as you probably would have. I'm so impressed by them. They had, I think, not as tough as they could get, but they had a really tough Big Ten slate right out of the gate, having to go to Maryland, having to go to Ohio State, having to face Iowa when I was, rolling right now. And I think Rutgers has played very, very well. They're only 3-2 in the Big Ten here, but they have a chance. Honestly, did you ever think you'd see a situation where Michigan State has a chance for a win to turn their season around at Rutgers? That's what they've got tomorrow night.
Home against Rutgers. Home against Rutgers.
Right. Home against Rutgers is a huge game for Michigan State, and it's also the sort of it's a chance for Rutgers to further put their feet up on the furniture in the Big Ten, so to speak. And I think they've earned it. They're tremendous to watch on offense. They're a big team. They're physical, and they they don't turn the ball over, which in a season with so many starts and stops and so much disruption, point guard play, it's hard to get into a rhythm, but their offense is flying. I think this Rutgers team is about to go on a real run in the Big Ten, and they still haven't gotten to play the fighting, some of the doormats of the Big Ten, such as they are.
Yeah, and this Rutgers team, like, they're getting healthy again. Murray is still out, but everyone else, including Caleb McConnell, who was supposed to be out for the season, suddenly back healthy and playing. So
Chad,
as they get healthier,
Chad, this Rutgers team, I just got to say, they failed to beat a team in the top 10. Iowa barely in the top 10 as 10th. My team can't beat top 10 teams. I think my team is equal to yours.
Actually, I was number 5, not number 10.
Well, okay, I'm sorry. They were number 10 the day of the game.
Okay. Yeah, we see the upcoming schedule here in the conference as well. The Maryland-Indiana game is going on as we record this, and Indiana's just putting the finishing touches on Maryland as we do this. That's going to be another nice one for Indiana, and Maryland might be the team, unfortunately, that's a real good team that just can't find a way to win enough games to do anything this year. I think we saw that coming out of this conference somewhere.
Yeah, a team that loses like 8 in a row in the Big Ten, but you're still making an argument because they're good enough.
But they're top 30 Ken Pom, yeah, one of those types of teams.
Top 30 Ken Pom, and they're like 2-12 in the league.
Wisconsin does help.
Mm-hmm. Salika, let me jump over to the Big East, which is your conference and Zach's conference. But let's start with your Xavier team, who suffered yet another loss.
Well, unfortunately, after the Creighton game, Xavier was due to eventually have a letdown here, but this is one of those days where it wasn't just a bad offensive performance, it was a bad defensive performance where if you look at during the regular season, they've actually been getting out-rebounded in more games than not compared to recent years, but when you're getting out-toughed, in the words of your own head coach, it's going to be a bit of a tough practice here, and normally they would have gotten back on their heels against Villanova Saturday, but obviously that got postponed because of the issues within Nova's program. But if you look at a program like Providence, they're going to be very similar to the Hall, where if Xavier were to lie down in a game like that, they're suddenly going to find themselves headed in the wrong direction, similar to last year. And this team doesn't have a Tyreek Jones, a Zach Hankins, or a Matt Stainbrook in the post that would help against teams like that.
Yeah, I got to say that we got that, but also, Joby, let me ask you about a team that Marquette. I can't figure this team out. I don't know that anybody can figure this team out. They've been so good and so bad so far.
Even our colleague Matt can't figure it out.
Okay.
Who went to Marquette. Yeah, I thought they were done and dusted against Georgetown, and they somehow, to their credit, came back. I don't think Marquette has it. Unfortunately, I think Marquette is endemic of the entire conference beyond the top, beyond Villanova, to be honest, maybe Creighton as well. Look at those nets. We were talking about the ACC and Big Ten. Whoa, we're all so impressed. Well, some conference had to take it on the chin. There are only 2 teams, if you did a pure slate ranking, that's not how you should do it completely, but it gives you an idea. If you did a pure ranking, only 2 teams clearly inside the at-large bubble there. That's bad long-term for the conference. So that when Providence plays Connecticut, it's not the same tier 1, high tier 1 win on the road and all this. It will hurt you long-term when you're looking at a nitty-gritty sheet. And so the Big East, the preseason and the net did not treat them as well as it did the ACC and the Big Ten. Marquette is just part of that endemic problem. And then on top of that, we'll let others talk, but you've got an inordinate amount of teams off their games. I'd point to Butler among those leading.
Yep. But Butler not looking good. A team that is looking good, Titel, Creighton picking up the road win at Providence.
Yeah, they are 8-2 after the win on Saturday. The rarely seen final second dunk by Christian Bishop. If you haven't seen it, go find it on the internet. It was amazing.
After they blew the game, though, after they really blew the game to get that position, you got to give Providence a little credit.
That's
Come on.
true, but without calling a timeout, just going for it. I mean, I was very impressed by Zagorowski with the pass. It's because they have a veteran group, 3 seniors and 2 juniors in the starting 5. Losses, very explainable. 1-point road loss at Kansas, 5-point home loss to Marquette. They're fine. I have them as a 3 seed right now. 2 of their final 5 games are against Villanova. So it's going to be 3-4 all season, and then it could go way up or way down at the end.
At this point in time, I'd like to invite everybody that's watching this to fast forward 5 minutes from now and pick up the show again. Zach, tell us about UConn's win over DePaul.
I'll tell you what, one of the latest chapter in one of the sport's great rivalries. No, it was just nice to see UConn playing a basketball game again. That was kind of odd. And after 10 days off, and then they went to another 5 days off. But no, they look good. And if they're going to be a good team, they need James Bouknight to not have to do everything. James Bouknight had 40 against Creighton in a loss, a game they should have won. In terms of the DePaul game, he wasn't nearly as involved. Got a quiet 20 points, but they got R.J. Cole, who was kind of the GOAT in the Creighton game. R.J. Cole played well in the Rhode Island transfer, Tyrese Martin. So it was the two transfers, Tyrese Martin and R.J. Cole, who played really well. And UConn needs a second scorer if they want to really, have a run in the NCAA tournament. And Rocco asked in the chat, and it's a good point, Akok Cook is expected to rejoin the team tomorrow. Kind of amazing. Some things have happened since he got injured in the Memphis game in February in the world and in college basketball. It was right in front of me. He completely ruptured his Achilles tendon. And he's apparently back and ready to go. So that provides them extra size up front to go with Adama Sanogo. A big game for them tomorrow night against a Marquette team that's terrifying because, like you guys, I have no idea what they are. Marquette is they seem to only exist to make their fans upset right now.
I think that's about right. Look at that Seton Hall Crane game coming up as well. That's a big one this week.
That was like 2 minutes, by the way.
Okay. If you went too far, rewind back 3 minutes, everybody. But
or ask me about CCSU and Hartford now.
We'll come Wednesday night. We'll do our under the radar. We'll do an hour on Maine basketball. But Rocco, let's jump over to the SEC where I think one of the stories here is a team I know you've been paying a little bit of attention to recently. How about Alabama? And not football, basketball.
Basketball, yes. We'll save football for another week, I guess. But a great win, tremendous win at Tennessee on Saturday is the reason we're starting with them. But just an amazing overall week. They had their SEC opener, don't forget, last Tuesday. Playing Ole Miss, I thought two pretty evenly matched teams. And not only did they blow them out by 18, but they held the Rebels to 1 3-point make, which is a pretty rare thing to do in today's college basketball, especially at the SEC level. And they turned around in the Tennessee game, and on the offensive end of the floor, they looked a lot more like Buffalo teams under Coach Oates, spreading the floor, getting open looks. John Petty finally back to full strength, played really well. They shot 10 for 20 from three, 50%. And Tennessee had looked just unbelievable in their blowout over Mizzou earlier in the week. So this kind of caught a lot of people off guard. But if you look a little bit more carefully at what Alabama did, they did finish 5th in the Maui Invite in Asheville, including a blowout win over Providence. A narrow loss to Clemson doesn't seem so bad anymore. A 2-point loss in the final minute to Western Kentucky. So their losses aren't bad. And now they've got this incredible Tennessee win to build off of. And we liked them a lot in preseason, at least I did. So I think this springboards them into SEC contendership.
And Joe, we've got to give a shout out to Kentucky thanks to a barely finding a way to escape a win at Mississippi State after Coach Cal gets ejected. Got from number 14 on our screen up to number 3 because they are undefeated in conference play. So there we go.
Well, and once again, you see these – this is not like – I think when people thought, well, what are Duke and Michigan State going to look like in the net, and they saw it in the hundreds, they're like, whoa. You see Kentucky go, why is there not a 2 in front of it? Everybody knows how stinky Kentucky's been this year, and they had, or at least results-wise. And the Mississippi State game was actually worse played by Kentucky than I'd argue a lot of their losses, especially the Kansas loss. And so it's Kentucky could still, just because they have raw talent, they're putting stuff together. Who knows? You just might see Kentucky win the regular season. Don't be shocked. I actually don't think it'll happen because Cal cannot get that defense working like he wants it in the amount of time he has. He only has 2 months before the end of the season. But don't be shocked if raw talent somehow pulls this out at the end of the day. It's just the perfect story. And by the way, that will be a killer for the conference as a whole to have the weight of a 6-loss out of conference team being either first, second, or third. Though, let's be honest, Tennessee is awesome, regardless of the Alabama loss. So
Tennessee is awesome.
I'm gonna go ahead and get out of the way now. I'm already upset at Rick Barnes for when somehow Tennessee gets swept by Kentucky, and that's the reason Kentucky gets in. I'm just going to get upset about it now because I have seen this car come down the highway time and time again.
Titel, you also got to look at a team that just barely missed the top 25, but at the top of our screen there, the Gators are starting to look pretty good as well.
Unbelievable. I thought they were going to throw in the towel after the Keontae Johnson injury. Now that he's out of the hospital, they celebrated by beating LSU only by 4 points on Saturday, but still 5-1, only the road loss at Florida State when Johnson got injured. He's not in the front court. They still have a great interior defense, allowing only 41% shooting inside the arc. I have them as a 6 seed right now. 0 seniors on the roster. If they bring everybody back, I think this team next year is like Final Four level good if they bring everybody back.
Wow. There we go. We got next year's Final Four set already. David, how about that LSU team, though? I mean, this is a team we haven't discussed much this year, I don't think. They get one vote in one of the top 25 polls, but a solid net number.
Yeah, I guess that's the best way to describe them as solid. They haven't done anything that really jumps off the page. I'm not like – I think that they could sneak into the tournament or be inside the bubble, but I'm not like – I don't put them in the same class as, say, what we've seen Tennessee or Alabama or Missouri do. And I know they played Florida close, but I still don't even like them as much overall as Florida. You probably should have gone with somebody else because LSU to me is kind of meh. Probably 10-seedish.
Well, I'll tell you what, we do have an interesting week ahead here with Tuesday night, assuming these games are a go, Florida at Alabama, Wednesday night, Arkansas at Tennessee, Kentucky at Florida on Saturday. So real interesting week in the SEC where we're not going to have as many interesting weeks this season just because of some of these teams just being, who the heck wants to watch Mississippi State play Vanderbilt? Not me. Let's jump over. Let's talk about the number one team in the nation. Sleek, actually, let me bring you in here again. The Zags are just absolutely rolling. After they pounded Dixie State, we thought San Francisco was a half-decent team, but they weren't.
Well, San Francisco was a team that had one good day back in November right here, and they've actually been more of a 500-ish team throughout the year, but Gonzaga, I've said it before, this is a team that's going to start drawing some parallels to 1991 UNLV, 2015 Kentucky, at least as far as regular season dominance right here. And I don't see a team in this conference that's going to be able to slow them down, certainly from an offensive point of view.
Yeah, I mean, Rocco, how are the Zags not going to go to the NCAA tournament undefeated at this point?
If they lose at BYU last game of the year, like
or
at home, like they lose at home to BYU a lot. I think BYU is just a really funky monster frontline team, but you have to have an answer to solve Gonzaga on the perimeter. And in fact, I thought San Francisco had an amazing game plan. They didn't make a three until that crazy Kispert shot to end the first half. Not sure if you guys watched the game, but that made the lead 10. San Francisco was playing a great first half, and then they just blew the doors off second half. But if a team like BYU with a little bit more athletic guards like Averett and some frontline guys, I don't know. You gotta pitch like a perfect game defensively to beat Gonzaga. They probably have a best chance of any. Also, St. Mary's with Bennett's defensive scheme. I just don't think St. Mary's can score enough points.
Yeah, I gotta say, I don't know what's wrong with the BPI having Gonzaga 4 because everyone else has the number one in their metrics where they belong. But Titel, he mentioned BYU. How about the Cougars?
To follow up a little on Rocco's point, they must have Depaul's scheduler because they get a 2-week layoff before hosting Pacific Thursday. Then they get a 1-week layoff before a very tough road trip at St. Mary's and at San Francisco. Good news in terms of the three-point shooting, Alex Barcelo, 63% behind the arc this year, 26 of 41. The bad news, Matt Harms, 7-3. He's attempted a three-pointer in every single game this year that he's played in. He's 2 of 18. My New Year's resolution, Matt, stop shooting.
Good advice. Anyway,
let's keep moving here. Let's jump over to the Pac-12 because we technically have to. Zach, for some reason, Oregon is still in the top 25. I mean, how about the Ducks? Are they actually any good?
I mean, it's tough because the league sucks. But I do think it's a good Oregon team. I don't think we will have any way of knowing quite how good they are for quite some time. I mean, they beat up on a Stanford team that's one of the best defensive teams in the country numerically. I mean, sure, it's a Stanford team that's played, a very soft out-of-conference schedule, but it's also a Stanford team that's played several strong out-of-conference games. Like Stanford had the not a lot of middle ground with their out-of-conference schedule when they were able to play, and it took them obviously a very long time to be able to get going, and they were kind of nomads in North Carolina. So for Oregon to go in and, dropping 73 on Stanford, that's actually more impressive than it ever could possibly sound. I think they're, probably the class of the conference right now. They have a stretch coming up. If you're going to have an impressive stretch in the Pac-12, this is it, in that they've got Colorado, Utah, and then the Arizona schools come in. And, I mean, it's a bad league, but I don't think it's – I just think the bottom is so bad in the Pac-12 that actually it makes people assume the whole thing is as bad as it's been the last few years. I actually think the Pac-12 is starting to get a bit of a bounce back, especially because we're starting to see teams like Oregon establish themselves more as a program, and also what Bobby Hurley's done out in Tempe. And, I mean, look, you want to talk about Pac-12? Hey, Kyle Smith out in Pullman nearly made us think that maybe it isn't just playing the worst schedule in the country that had them 8-0, as they took the Wildcats to double OT in a loss. But and it's funny because Ken Pom projects them to lose all but 2 remaining games, and right now they're 8-1. But I wanted to give a shout out.
I did want to ask about them. I'm glad you brought them up, because not only did they play a weak schedule, they struggled against it, but yet it was an ugly game. It was a rock fight, but they were right in there with Arizona.
Unfortunately,
there's no expectations at Washington State, but maybe they are a team that I think can get a couple of wins that can maybe upend the conference race for others. That's why, from what I've seen.
And I just wanted to keep going here with a couple of teams. Joby, as we could see now, if came out, I believe, right after our last show that we did. Arizona's in red, having self-imposed sanctions, and according to the net, they were the second best team in the conference, or maybe third best.
Actually, the Washington State game makes you question, but Arizona, Cincinnati, they beat the Washington schools great, but they've actually played. Titel, your boys have started playing pretty well, I think. I mean,
that's a half-hearted clap there, Titel.
Yeah.
But here's the thing: is they are playing the level of a NCAA tournament team, which means that Miller might be a better man than Boeheim and Louisville, who say, "Oh well, we suck, so we'll just take our year now." I actually think this Arizona team, if they didn't take the year now, would have a real shot. As I said a couple of weeks ago, the Pac-12 will have a few teams rack up really nice records that, you got to take them because you can't take the 7-13 ACC or Big Ten team. Thus, the Pac-12 will get some of those bids. Maybe not, because Arizona might be in the position to take one but can't accept it.
Well, Titel, what about a couple of these other teams in the top that do have decent nets? How about USC, for example?
They had an easy home win over Utah on Saturday. They hit the road this week to play my boys as well as Coach Hurley. Great interior defense. They're only allowing 39% inside the arc, but they're going to get bitten in the butt by the free throw line. 61% as a team. Terrible. I still can't believe it. Evan Mobley is probably going to be a lottery pick. He attempted 0 shots against Utah. Good news, doesn't matter because the Ute shot 28% from the field. I have them as an 11 seed right now.
And how about cross town from them, Rocco? UCLA, real nice win over Colorado this week, I thought.
Yeah, good week on the court, really bad week off the court. So, if you guys didn't hear, Chris Smith, all Pac-12 player, torn ACL, out for the season, real big blow. Of course, Mick Cronin's a magician, and he got guys like Jamie Jacques and Johnny Juzang, Bernard, and Campbell. They all played 33-plus minutes to beat Colorado. They're just not going to be built to be as deep as we thought without Smith. But they found a way to get it done. Colorado's a very good metrics team. I'm still waiting for them to get a big win. They couldn't. They did get one at USC, which is probably their best win now.
They get Oregon Thursday, so that's a big one.
Big one, yeah. So UCLA, I think, still belongs in the discussion to win the league. I agree with what Zach said earlier on Oregon. They're probably now the favorite. But it should be a really good race overall.
Here's another fun thing to consider this weekend. If UCLA is able to win at Arizona, could Mick Cronin be 3-0 against Sean Miller? Would have never happened in the crosstown shootout.
Well, I guess speaking of crosstown shootouts, let's jump over to Cincinnati's conference and not discuss them because they are now in dead last.
They want to talk about having a week off the court. They are literally the Jonah Hill stroking his temple meme. Right? Cincinnati basketball's in a bad way.
Let's talk about. I mean, Houston had the huge win at SMU, but Rocco, that came after what happened on Tuesday night against Tulsa.
Yeah, Frank Haith special, 2 years in a row, right? So if you remember last season, start of January, nobody thought anything of Tulsa. And all of a sudden, Houston comes to town. And what do you know? Tulsa throws a change-up, nasty matchup zone. Houston doesn't get anything done offensively they wanted to, and Tulsa escapes with a 2-point win. This year, very similar story, much fewer games played at this point, sadly. But Tulsa, again, gives Houston fits, hangs around, and Brandon Rashall gets fouled with 1 second left, down 1, 2 free throws, ends up draining both. Just real big moment there. Tulsa, for the second straight year, beats Houston. Then they go and play our friends in Cincinnati and get a big road win for them. So 3-1 in the league now for the Golden Hurricane, and we're going to probably have to talk about them the rest of the way.
Oh,
Sorry,
yep. If you go back to our preseason podcast, nobody wanted to discuss them. I said, I think I mentioned, you can't count this team out just because it always does this to us.
Amazing.
It's Zach special every year.
They won the conference last year, and the gods said, we will not have a tournament. This will not occur. And this year, nobody believes in them again. They came out of the gate and were bad and said, all right, we're done with this. And then they go on to be a very, very good Houston team. And still nobody wants to talk about them. It might be my favorite team in America.
Dad, you said we were not allowed to talk about the team that is in first place.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to let Tytel talk about that team. I know, Tytel, you want to actually discuss them. I buzzed Salika for discussing them last week, but I'll give you a shot anyhow.
They're top of the list. They started very weak. They had the coaching switch to Isaac Brown. They had home losses to Missouri and Oklahoma State, which both look fine now. They've won 5 in a row to get to 6-2. Huge road test at Houston on Wednesday. Only 2 of their top 13 scorers are seniors, so this team has a very bright future. Talk about the best college athlete named Etienne. It might not be the Clemson running back. It might be sophomore shooting guard Tyson Etienne, an elite three-point shooter, 12 threes in his past 4 games.
Well, we'll see. I still don't believe in them. And I think that they're going to get pounded Wednesday night in Houston. That should be the end of the story for this Wichita State team. But Salika, let me go back to you here and jump over to the Atlantic 10, where if we see the standings coming, wow, VCU in first place? I guess so.
Yeah, VCU is going to be in first place thanks to
after that big win against St. Joe's. Woo! 1-0 in the league.
But we're also talking about a team like Richmond that's starting to slip through the cracks right here. I mean, we talk about St. Bonaventure getting a nice win, but that's going to hurt the Spiders, though.
Yeah,
but
the
I think the prize this week is going to be LaSalle going into UD Arena and getting away with a win.
Yeah, LaSalle is second in this conference at 4-5 against Division I competition. I mean, come on. What has happened, A10? Oh,
well. Yeah, I'll tell you, David. With St. Louis has not played a conference game yet. They're still in top 25. But is there anybody? I mean, that might be the only team we have any faith left in at this point.
I have a little faith in VCU. I think they got what it takes to land inside the bubble. I still think Richmond kind of does this. They'll go through they'll go through a series of games, or there'll be games throughout the year that they lose, and you're just really scratching your head about how it happened. I don't know why that is. It's the way they play can really drive teams crazy, but it can also be picked apart at other times where you don't think it's going to be. I don't know that they're going to get all those teams in, but I think that there's going to be 4 teams at least in the race or that we need to keep looking at. The only other thing I have to say is that I thought it was a mistake for St. Joe's when they got rid of Phil Martelli, and they have done nothing this year to make me change my mind.
I would say I do actually have a thought on a different A10 team.
Okay.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
It might be the same team Titel wants to address, but go ahead, Zach, you first.
Let John go first because he actually knows what he's talking about.
Okay, John, you have a team you want to discuss here?
The only team that is off to a whopping 3-1 start, the St. Bonaventure Bonnies.
Yes, good team.
Eased into the season with only 2 non-conference games, but a nice 3-point win at Richmond on Saturday, thanks to Kyle Lofton making a game-winning 3 in the final seconds. We start 5 juniors, so not only is the future bright, I think they're going to win the conference next year because St. Louis and Richmond are going to graduate a bunch of seniors. Check out the rosters. The offense is weird. It's a bunch of 6'5" shooters surrounding the big man, Ochun Ochuniye, but it's working.
Yeah, and Mark Schmidt, once again, just commitment to strangling the 3-point shot in the crib for his team and against it. It is a very bad 3-point shooting team, but a very strong team defending the 3. And the A-10's not a very good conference this year, obviously. I've got an eye on St. Bonaventure to get some wins in this league. I don't know. I can't tell you if they're any good just because, as John alluded to, they barely played. And they just have the A-10 left. And, I mean, I don't think that's really going to tell us much unless they can beat that powerhouse in South Philly. But
yeah, they get the Bonnies at GW this week. Oh, boy.
Yeah. Well, it's a sort of, if it was a normal year, I think I would pick St. Bonaventure to win the conference tournament, but it's very much not a normal year.
Let's we've got one last conference to head to, and Rocco, I'm going to start with you with this conference because we saw an absolutely jaw-dropping, amazing game. I can't even figure out what the heck happened because San Diego State had a 300 million point lead on Colorado State on Saturday, and I turned the game off, and San Diego State won, right?
The scientists are still trying to figure out what happened. Anyway, go ahead, Rocco. Sorry.
Hey, David, you're not lying. I spent, I don't know if I've shared with you guys my Monday morning routine, but I generally get up during this time of year, 4 a.m. to work on all the recap for the week. And I probably spent an hour this morning just staring at the graph from Ken Palm's website on this game. It was amazing. San Diego State kicked off the game with a nice 33-5 run. And then Colorado State, right after that, goes on a 19-0 run. And that all happened before halftime. But as the second half played out, I think San Diego State was built up another 15 or so point lead, maybe even 17. And Colorado State goes on a 14-0 run to come back down by 1. Then San Diego State stretches out again, and CSU ends it on an 11-0 run, which was topped off by a 4-point play in the corner on a one-footed shot. This game had everything. Go back and watch the highlights. Watch the extended highlights. Kill some time. Your Netflix shows will be there for you later. This is all timer for sure. It's the biggest comeback in Mountain West history, and I think the underlying message or coming out of this is it's just a great moment for Nico Medved. He's been trying to get this program going now in year 3. They've dealt with some injuries in the last couple of years. They've got 2 super sophomores in Isaiah Stevens and David Roddy that are worth the price of admission. And I think also some of this is a little bit of an indictment on San Diego State's scoring droughts. They had this problem last year when they were upset by UNLV. If you remember, they almost lost to San Jose State.
Yeah, they did.
And they just have these weird lapses where they go without scoring, and they've got to get a hold of that. And that happened to them in the BYU loss too. So couple things to take away from here. But obviously tonight they're rematching, and San Diego State's back up by 16. So
well, okay, but they were up by 27.
Right.
Colorado State has it down to 16.
Here comes Colorado State again tonight.
That game itself, too, is an interesting, unfortunately, measurement of the effect of no crowds. I mean, if San Diego State gets a 28-point lead
in front of the show,
right,
it's over historically, and the place is going nuts. And the Colorado State players, in addition to getting the brains beaten, are just, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
Nobody there. There's nobody there. And these things, and it goes both ways. The things can spiral out of control. The ability for San Diego State's kids to panic and go, oh God, we might lose this. There's no positive reinforcement there for them other than what's happened. And so it was a fascinating study in the effect of playing, a game without crowds in a vacuum, but especially given that it happened in one of what is usually the most important home court advantages in the country.
Yeah.
I got to say also, Joby, let me ask you about another team here. This very similar thing happened. We talk about no crowds and the like. Boise State on Thursday beat San Jose State by 52 points. It was ridiculous. And lo and behold, they play again Saturday, and Boise State got the win is about all I can say. 87-86.
Well, and that's what's crazy. That is a COVID moment. I mean, there's no other way to sound around it. This Boise State team is legit. They are at large, good enough. Legit.
Yes,
they are. Period. They probably, with San Diego State showing some of that weakness, I might be switching from San Diego State to Boise State to win the regular season. I'm serious when I say that. So I'm a believer in Boise State. I'm going to chalk the second one up to just weirdness, playing a team again. It happens. It's tough to beat a team twice, but it is San Jose State, and they're awful beyond awful.
But they almost won.
Right. That's right. I think the joke of they're no Fort Hays State. Yeah. In all seriousness, San Jose State really isn't a Fort Hays.
Right. It's a 14-0 run. The lead is down.
Also, I would mention first San Jose State, Boise State.
17-5 in the second half for Colorado. We're wondering what David's talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try not to talk over each other.
The first San Jose State Boise State game was played literally in a recreational center, a rec center
that they rented.
That game was weird for a lot of reasons.
Well, that was the first game. The second game was played at Grand Canyon. So
right,
but
I was going to say, not for that one word explains the two games. Altitude difference, but they were both played.
Titel, how about one other team in here? What about the Wolfpack?
So you wouldn't think they'd be worth mentioning, except for the fact that they are 8-3, which is nice. But they also did something this week that I never thought I'd seen in my life. They swept New Mexico. Wait for it, in Lubbock, Texas. Because of COVID. It must have pissed somebody off, though, because their reward is they get to play a pair of road games at San Diego State later this week. You talk about bad losses. I don't know if there's any team in the country that has a worse home loss than Air Force last month. Good Lord. Good news, they only have one senior on the roster. Bad news, they're so young. Steve Alford is just juggling lineups because he's got all these young players who don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, by the way, that was not at Texas Tech. The Lubbock games were at Lubbock Christian University. New school that I don't know that I'd ever heard of before.
Who is now the 12th member of the American Athletic Conference. Also, you think, Chad, if you think I'm letting you get away with not mentioning the 7-1 Wyoming Cowboys, you're out of your goddamn mind.
Okay, well, on that note, go ahead.
Longest schedule. Probably still not a good team, but Jeff Linder's trying to get something going there after going to Laramie from Northern Colorado. They'll get their hands full next week. 2 games at home against Boise State. We will find out if they are remotely close to being good, because I am still not sold on them, but they are always in my hearts and always at altitude.
And it's the Front Range. We know we all love it.
But on that note, I'm going to do is go ahead and pull this down here. Let's go to any of your final thoughts. And Joby, let me start off with you on final thoughts, if we have you there. Okay, we seem to have lost Joby for a moment. Let me go over to Slika. We'll try to get Joby back.
Well, Zach had talked earlier about Georgia Tech here. Now that they're going to be 2-1 in the ACC, they have nice wins against Wake Forest and North Carolina. But I can tell you, the eyes of the world are going to be on them as they head to Notre Dame come Wednesday nights.
All right, Titel.
So I thought that Luka Garza had the scoring title wrapped up and we could just hand him the trophy. And then you forget about a kid like Justin Jaworski at Lafayette. He tore his ACL last February. One of the perks of having a delayed season is that it gives injured players extra time to recover. So 11 months later, he comes back onto the court for Lafayette. Now they're finally back in the Patriot League. And all he does is score 65 in 2 games against arch rival Lehigh. I love seeing guys overcome injuries. Rocco talked about Andrew Jones earlier. This kid is literally leading the country in scoring after coming off an ACL tear. Good on you, Justin.
All right, good on you, Justin. Rocco.
Yeah, so, going back to the NCAA tournament announcements earlier today, I think it's important to note that from all indications, a lot of questions got fired at both Mr. Gavitt and Mr. Barnhart, the selection committee chair today, about the selection process. And basically, they're not giving us any different criteria yet. There's a lot of questions about how they're going to handle road games. Do they matter as much as before? Will they tweak that? He basically answered on both sides of that by saying, on one hand, it's just as difficult to travel, if not harder, because you go through the testing and it's uncomfortable, and then all of a sudden you got to play a game in an unfamiliar place, which great point. But then also they're taking into account, at least they're discussing, crowd sizes. Like he gave the example at Rupp Arena, they're getting 2,000 people instead of 20,000 people. So it would be really interesting to see if anything changes with that element. I think just another thing to keep in mind too, you look at the overall picture with Arizona going on a postseason ban, self-induced, and also of course Oklahoma State, who looks like a tournament caliber team, and you add in the Ivy League bid. Now all of a sudden there's 3 bids probably going to at-large teams that may have not earned it if Arizona and Oklahoma State continue to play at this level. So I would just say, given all of that, hopefully, even if they're off by just a little bit, we'll still get all the right teams into the 37 at-large spots.
I thought you should have said 4 though, because we're talking. We also lose Alabama A&M's at large.
They're auto bid, right?
Okay,
3-bid SWAC.
the 2-bid SWAC. Yeah, Joby, I think you're back with us.
Yeah, sorry about that. The computer messed up when it pulled off. Real quick, because you got my points mainly. The net is extremely, because the net was released today, I'm going to repeat what I say around this time when it's released every time to our viewers. The net is most important, they say, as a sorting tool. What that means is it's easy, and I even did it in the show tonight, is to say, oh, a team is ranked 10th, that means they're a 3 seed. No. What it does is a team plays that team, they're getting a tier 1 win. The numbers to look at are numbers like 30, which is a tier 1 breakoff, 70, 75. Look at the numbers that create the tiers. That's why it's important when I was talking about the ACC and the Big Ten. All of a sudden, you're getting tier 1 wins you probably don't deserve as tier 1 if your conference is getting a high overall net. Whereas the Big East, bottom half of the Pac-12, for instance, not Colorado, who looks really good, they are going to get hurt a little bit by the fact that, wait a minute, you beat Butler on the road. That should mean something, right? No, it means you won a tier 3 win. Who gives a darn? And so that is when you're looking at the net, don't get stuck in this, even that I did today, of rankings, but of overall body of work and applying it to your team's opponents.
Zach, when you talked about Wyoming, by the way, they're getting blown out of Fresno State right now. I'm very disappointed you didn't mention that San Jose State is in the process of a 25-point win against Benedictine Mesa. But let me go ahead and let you give your final thoughts.
You're assuming they're going to hold on to that? Are you sure?
Well, Benedictine is halftime, Hey.
One thing I had was I wanted to give a shout out to actually another A-10 team, one that we're not going to talk about much, but just a shout out to Keith Dambrot and the Dukes at Duquesne, who last week played their first game in a month and played 2 on the road at George Washington. Now, as some members of this call may know, it's not exactly a vintage George Washington team right now, but they hadn't played for a month. They went from December 2nd to Saturday, January 2nd, without playing, and they won by 12 in the first game at George Washington, and they lost the second game by 2. So I'm just tremendously impressed that they were able to take a month off and play well, albeit against not a very good team, because that's as long of a pause as I think anyone's almost anyone has had that's playing this year. They've been beneficiary of the fact that the 3 teams they have played are horrendous free throw teams, but that's the least the Dukes deserve for what they've had to go through this year.
Good point. David, do you want to finish the show off?
Yes, a big announcement here. I've decided to declare for the NBA draft.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have a real final thought? Or?
What's that?
Okay. All right.
I did, but I shared it at the beginning of the show when I went on about the NCAA tournament. So rather than repeat it, I'll just end by declaring for the draft.
Okay.
At least I waited till after the show and didn't do it at halftime like the kid from, was it Oklahoma State?
Well, as a result of declaring, David is ineligible for the balance of the season. So thankfully, our shows will be a lot better from now on.
No, wait, I'm still going to be on the show.
But I do want to take this chance to thank everybody for joining us. On behalf of Joby Fortson and David Griggs up top here, Rocco Miller from Bracketeer.org in the center square, John Titell and John Salika to the sides, Zach way down there in the bottom, coming to us from Liverpool. I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us.
Everton's better.
Talk to you again real soon. And
Everton's better.
Declare.
All right. Take care, everybody. Good night.
All right.